I'd like to grapple with this question today. How do we eat with integrity? Now, the thing is, when we start asking this question, immediately we start debating certain aspects of the food itself. We say, was it grown sustainably? How local is it? Is it organic? But when we ask about the food, we overlook another set of questions that I think are equally important, if not more so, for trying to eat with integrity. And those are questions that have to do with who produced the food. Questions like, was this food produced on a family farm instead of a large industrial farm? Or how much was the farmer paid for this food? So I'd like to set the stage for the rest of my presentation by giving you guys a few statistics about those two questions to paint a portrait of the food system that we currently have now. So to the first question, family farms. I'm going to give you two simple statistics that are going to summarize what happened to family farms in the United States over the course of the last century. The first one is the number of farms. So this is the change in the number of farms in the US since 1900. We can see what happened. A precipitous decline. We've lost a lot of farmers, about 4.5 million. But while that's happened, the average size of a farm has nearly tripled. So in sum, our food is now being produced by a lot fewer but much larger farms. But now to the second question. How much do farmers get for the product that they produce? Before I go there, I'd like to ask you all a question. Think about some major service or good in the wider economy that you might purchase. Think about a household appliance, a house, a car, clothing, a restaurant bill, even a college education. And ask yourself this: how has the price that the producer of that thing receives changed over the last 30 years? How has the price of that thing that the producer receives changed since, say, 1980? And for all those items and many others, the answer would be, it's gone up. The price of all those things has gone up quite a bit. But there's one major class of items that hasn't gone up, and that's the price that farmers receive for their product. So we're going to investigate that. And we'll start with what we call the big three: corn, soybeans, and wheat, the three most commonly produced agricultural products in the country. And we're going to look at how the price that a farmer receives on average per bushel of these crops has changed since 1980. So let's start with soybeans. What do we see? Quite a bit of volatility, sometimes between one year and the next, the price changing by $2 a bushel. But if you were to draw a line through that to try to average it, it would basically be a flat line, except for a little bump here recently. How about wheat? Same basic trend. If you were to draw a line through that, it's basically flat. And everyone's favorite, corn, again, this exact same story, essentially a flat line. In other words, you go back only a couple years to about 2006, and the farmer was receiving the same price per bushel that they received in 1980. How can a farm possibly make it in this price environment? Of course, corn, soybeans, wheat, these are kind of hard to get your head around. They're big commodity crops. We sort of understand that. So I decided I'm going to try to think of 5 fruits and vegetables that are a little closer to home, literally, that grow here in Wayne County and that we might encounter more on a daily basis. And I want to know the same thing. So I chose strawberries, tomatoes, broccoli, apples, and potatoes. And I want to know, how does the price that a farmer receives for these crops change since 1980? We'll start with strawberries. It's actually the one that bucks the trend. We see that the price actually has gone up, and especially quite recently. But when we move to tomatoes, we see a line that's very similar to the big three. A little bump recently, but by and large, a fairly stagnant line. How about broccoli? There has been a slow upward trend over time, but that's not a line that any businessman would envy. Apples, basically a flat line. Potatoes, literally almost a flat line. So once again, we can ask, how can a farmer make it in this price environment? Now, you might think, well, that's because food is really cheap in the US. We don't pay a lot for our food. But in fact, these same trends are not matched at the grocery store. So let's look at each of these 5 again quickly. So the line you're going to see on the bottom is the same one I just showed you. So this one's for potatoes, and this is that line there in red is how much the farmer of potatoes gets per pound of potatoes. And you see the same thing I just showed you is fairly flat. But how has the price of potatoes in the grocery store changed over time? That's gone up and up and up over time. So the gap between what the farmer receives for the potato and what you pay for the potato at the grocery store has gotten wider over time. And we see the same trend repeated for apples, for broccoli, for tomatoes, and even strawberries, the one crop that the farmers seem to be getting a little bit more year after year. That gap is probably the widest of all between what the farmer gets and what you pay at the grocery store. And what's going on here? Well, economists like to talk about the food dollar, which basically means for every dollar you spend at the grocery store, what portion of that dollar goes to the farmer versus to transportation, say, or marketing, or even to the grocery store. And for farmers of produce like this, the amount of every dollar you spend that goes back to them has gotten smaller and smaller and smaller over time. Today, the average for fruits and vegetables is about 20 cents. That means for every dollar you spend on produce in the grocery store, 20 cents goes into the farmer's pocket. And I want you to remember that figure. So this kind of brings us back around to our initial question. What can we do about this? And it clarifies the question a bit, because now it becomes this. How can we get more money into the farmer's pocket to reverse these kinds of trends? There have been a number of solutions proposed over the years. I'm going to look at 3 of them. We'll start with the good old farmer's market. We have a farmer's market right here in Worcester. It's from June through October. Farmers markets are great for farmers. You get to have relationships with your customers. You get to set your own price, which is amazing. But of course, they're seasonal. So if you rely on the farmer's market for your income, what do you do from November through May? You have no market. And also, the farmer has to be there on site. That's the whole deal with a farmer's market. And that's valuable time away from your farm, right during peak of the season. So it has some drawbacks, too. How about a grocery store that goes out and buys local produce and features it at a special stand in their store? This is a growing trend, and you can see why it'd be popular with farmers. But it has a couple drawbacks, too. First of all, you have your local produce there in the store, and that's great, but it's surrounded by a sea of produce from California. And second of all, the farmer's not naming their own price. They're back to selling wholesale again. Finally, a much older model that's been around for a while is the producers' cooperative. This is where a group of farmers gets together and through their group clout has a little bit more control over the price. These have been around for a long time. They're very powerful vehicles. The only issue with them is they don't really have a retail component. The farmers get together and they produce their product, but they're still ultimately selling to a middleman. Now, here's the question I'm going to ask you. What if we could come up with a new model that essentially took the best aspects of each of these 3 and combined them together? What if we could come up with a model for a local food system in which farmers could band together, sell their products in an enclosed space without having to be there, and name their own price? Well, believe it or not, this is happening right here in Worcester, Ohio. A group of 12 people got together about 5 years ago and started brainstorming this kind of a model. And through a lot of trial and error and a lot of hard work, they came up with Local Roots. Familiar to many of you, I'm sure. What is Local Roots? Well, Local Roots is basically a producer-consumer cooperative. That means that the producers are members and the customers may also be members. So everybody has a say in the decisions about what happens at Local Roots. But more superficially anyway, it's a store. It's a store where producers bring their product, set it up on the shelves, walk away, and they name the price of their product. That's critical. So when you walk into Local Roots, you see a store. You see lots of products, all of them local, all of them supplied by local producers, and all of them the price picked by local producers. So you see early season, mid-season, late season products, vegetables, fruits like apples. But then we go well beyond produce as well. We see eggs from local chicken flocks. We see a dairy case full of locally produced cheese, yogurt, milk. We see a big meat case. You probably can't read that from back there, but there's beef, chicken, pork, lamb, hot dogs, sausages, you name it, all locally produced. We see other kinds of food products. We have oil made from locally grown sunflowers. We have flour. We have grains, syrup, honey. We have breads and other baked goods. And then there's even an entire room for artisan craft, such as baskets, fiber goods, and pottery. And again, the critical point, every item here is local, but more importantly, the price of the item was named by the producer. Okay? Local Roots takes a 15% administrative fee. That means that the farmer is taking home 85%. Okay? For every dollar you spend at local roots, the farmer gets 85 cents. And what was that figure before? 20 cents. 20 cents versus 85 cents. So a farmer at local roots is getting 4 times your food dollar as they are out in the wider marketplace. So you're probably wondering, well, how does it work? What happens when you put in place a model like this? Well, a number of things happen. The first thing that happens is people start talking about it. I'm certainly not the first one. It's received quite a bit of press in the regional media, in the statewide media, and even in the national media, all the way up to the Washington Post, which did a profile of local roots last year. Second thing that happens, people start coming. So this is local roots sales data by month, above and below aggregated as annual data. You see a nice upward trend. You see some other interesting things. In January and February, sales dip. It's probably to be expected. Their best month ever was in December of just this past year. And in June of last year, they reached the cumulative $1 million sales mark, a huge milestone for them after about 2.5 years of operation. The third thing that happens, and probably the most important from the point of view of my talk today, is that the farmer makes a lot more money. So far when I've shown you these commodity prices, I've shown you over time. Well, let's just look at now what a farmer gets. So we're going to look at the same 5 things. And first I'm going to show you what a commodity farmer gets. So for potatoes, a commodity farmer gets about 12 cents a pound. Potatoes are really a commodity crop like wheat or soybeans. They're not worth very much in the marketplace. But the average potato farmer at local roots gets $1.54 a pound. In the wider marketplace, a broccoli farmer might expect to earn about 39 cents a pound. Broccoli at local roots will net the farmer $1.22 a pound. Apples in the wider marketplace, 30 cents a pound. Apples at local roots will net the farmer $1.46 a pound. That's not the sale price, that's the price that goes in the farmer's pocket. Tomatoes, 40 cents a pound in the wider marketplace, $1.30 at local roots. And strawberries, you get about $1 a pound if you're a strawberry farmer. At local roots, if you're a strawberry farmer, you get about $1.62 a pound. So we can see right here the effect that 85% going back in the farmer's pocket has. This graph is also interesting because it combats one of the accusations that's often made about local food, which is that it's too expensive. So look at those prices in the back. Add 15%. That's about what you pay at a grocery store. Sometimes it's cheaper than you pay for at a grocery store or even at Walmart. There's a fourth thing that happens, which is we start to see some value added. And the best example of this is the cafe. So you might have noticed when I first showed you Local Roots, it's a Local Roots Market and Cafe. They put a cafe in about 2 years ago. And as you might expect, they use almost exclusively products from the various producers that sell at Local Roots. So now you're adding value to this product, and you're creating a new environment for people to come to Local Roots and eat. The cafe is open every day for lunch. A fourth thing that happens is that some producers are now able to produce full-time for this market. So I'll give you a few examples. This is Jennifer. Right at the time that Local Roots was starting, she actually left a full-time job with benefits. And almost on a whim, she started baking and selling her product at Local Roots. Well, her sales grew and grew over time to the point where she now is essentially a full-time baker, and her main market by far is Local Roots. This is Martha, shown here with her son and their chicken flock. They are full-time farmers, and Local Roots has single-handedly allowed them to be full-time farmers. They were struggling to find enough markets through farmers markets and other outlets until Local Roots came along. And another success story is the Yoder family, Marion and Joseph and their children. They produce a wide variety of products from meat to eggs to produce, and they too are full-time farmers, and their main market outlet is Local Roots. The last thing I want to say about Local Roots is that it's tiny. It's one little store in one little town in one county in Northeast Ohio. The full radius of all their producers is about that large. So the question then is, can it be replicated? Well, it's starting now. There's another Local Roots that opened up in Ashland, and they're just getting their wings. But why can't we see more? Why can't we see a Local Roots in Coshocton County? Why can't we see a Local Roots in Cleveland that captures produce from Northeast Ohio, or Akron, or Canton? How about a Local Roots in Central Ohio for all the area around Columbus? How about a Local Roots down in Cincinnati? What about Northwest Ohio, Southeast Ohio, Western Ohio, and on and on and on. What we have here is a viable model that's highly replicable.